The Krasen were once the undisputed rulers of their region of the galaxy. Their technology, unmatched by any known race, had kept them safe for centuries. But now, an enemy unlike any they had faced before was tearing through their defenses. The enemy's relentless attacks overwhelmed even their most powerful warships. Every attempt to fight back had failed, and their once thriving empire was slowly crumbling. In the Krasen Council chamber, the mood was grim. The High Council, made up of their most esteemed leaders, debated the unthinkable. Should they request aid from the humans? A race they had always considered primitive and beneath them. Their technology was nothing compared to Krasen advancements, and yet they had no other options. Desperation clouded their judgment. "Is this what it has come to?" one of the council members asked, his voice filled with disdain. "Begging for help from the humans?" Another council member responded. "If we do not act now, our people will perish. We have exhausted every option." Commander Valdar, the leader of the Krasen military, sat in silence, weighing the situation. Finally, he spoke. "Send the message. We cannot allow pride to be our downfall. The humans may be our last chance." Despite the reluctance, the Krasen transmitted their message, a plea for aid. In their hearts, they expected humanity to send a powerful fleet, massive ships equipped with cutting-edge technology. The Krasen were used to dealing with might, and they believed might would be what saved them. The distress signal reached Earth, where humanity had come a long way in the galactic community, though they were still seen as young and somewhat inexperienced compared to older species like the Krasen. In a high-tech command center, Earth's leaders gathered to assess the situation. The scale of the crisis was evident from the Krasen message, but it was clear that sending humanity's best fleets could risk their own planetary security. After much deliberation, Earth's leadership made a decision. They would deploy their weakest fleet, a force composed of old, decommissioned ships and young, inexperienced soldiers. It would serve as a stopgap measure, buying time until real reinforcements could arrive. In charge of this fleet was Captain Nora Daniels, a brilliant strategist who had always been regarded as an outsider due to her unconventional methods. To some, she was an underdog, brilliant but not fully trusted by the higher echelons of command. "Captain Daniels," the Earth Council informed her, "you are being assigned to lead the fleet in response to the Krasen call for aid. We know your ships aren't the best, but your task is to hold the line." Nora nodded. She knew the odds were against them, but she was used to working with less than ideal resources. "We'll do what we must," she said, her voice calm despite the weight of the situation. Meanwhile, on the Krasen homeworld, the news of the human response arrived. The Council, particularly Commander Valdar, was eager to see the reinforcements. The Krasen had heard much about the humans' progress in the galaxy, and despite their skepticism, they hoped the humans would send a fleet worthy of their expectations: massive, technologically advanced warships that could stand alongside their own. "The humans may be younger in the cosmic community," Valdar said to his council, "but they've shown promise. Their fleet will turn the tide of this war." The Krasen waited eagerly, convinced that humanity would bring its best to the battlefield. They envisioned ships that would dwarf even their own, armed with weapons capable of annihilating the mysterious enemy that plagued them. Valdar spoke to his people, reassuring them that salvation was on the way. The humans, though once considered inferior, would be their saviors. The day finally came when the human fleet arrived in Krasen space. The Krasen watched in anticipation, their mighty warships hovering like silent giants, waiting to welcome their new allies. But what they saw shocked them. Instead of a grand armada, a collection of old, outdated human ships emerged from hyperspace. They looked fragile compared to the Krasen vessels, their worn exteriors a stark contrast to the sleek and polished hulls of the Krasen fleet. On the bridge of his command ship, Commander Valdar stared in disbelief. "What is this?" he muttered. "Is this a joke?" His fellow officers were equally outraged. They had expected something grand, something powerful. Instead, the humans had sent what appeared to be a fleet of museum relics. One of the Krasen admirals slammed his fist on the table. "The humans mock us. They think so little of us that they send this scrap heap." Valdar's face hardened with anger, but as he looked at the growing threat from the enemy, he knew they had no choice. Their enemies were closing in, and even if the human fleet seemed weak, they could not afford to turn them away. "We are running out of time," Valdar said quietly. "Let them assist. We'll see what they are capable of. If they fail us, it will be on their heads." The Krasen Council remained divided. Some believed the humans had insulted them by sending such a pitiful fleet, while others were willing to give the humans a chance. The enemy's threat was growing by the hour, and turning away potential allies, no matter how weak they seemed, was a risk they could not afford. Valdar stared at the incoming human fleet one last time before giving his orders. "Let them into formation," he commanded. "We'll see if these humans can survive the firestorm that is to come." As the human ships took their positions, the tension between the two fleets was palpable. The Krasen watched their new allies closely, still unsure if the humans were a lifeline or a liability. The Tauric had been an enigma for years, a species that moved in shadows and struck without mercy. The Krasen had only learned of them when they were already under attack. A hive mind race, the Tauric operated with terrifying precision, overwhelming their targets with sheer numbers and biological weapons that no conventional defense could stop. Their most devastating weapon was a corrosive substance, which, when deployed, could eat through the toughest Krasen armor in seconds. No shield, no barrier could hold against it. The Krasen had watched helplessly as entire fleets disintegrated, reduced to molten debris in the cold vacuum of space. The Tauric's tactics were simple: swarm, overwhelm, and leave nothing behind. The Krasen believed that the only way to defeat such an enemy was with overwhelming firepower. But despite deploying their best ships and most advanced technology, nothing had worked. The Tauric adapted quickly, and their hive mind allowed them to coordinate attacks in ways no single-minded race could comprehend. This relentless enemy left the Krasen with only fear, and the desperate hope that the humans might somehow tip the scales. As the human fleet arrived and took its position, Captain Nora Daniels carefully studied the enemy. The Krasen had given her access to all the intelligence they had on the Tauric. It was clear why the Krasen had struggled. They were using their superior firepower to try and outmuscle an enemy that didn't play by the same rules. Nora knew that the same approach would lead to failure. If her ragtag fleet stood any chance, they couldn't rely on brute strength. She issued her orders. The human ships scattered, moving in patterns that looked chaotic from the outside but were meticulously planned. The Krasen watched in confusion as the humans seemed to break formation. To them, it appeared as though the humans were retreating or avoiding direct engagement, which only reinforced their view of human weakness. Commander Valdar observed from his command deck, frustration brewing as the humans refused to engage the Tauric head-on. "What are they doing?" he muttered. "They scatter like frightened prey." On the human side, Nora's calm voice filled the calm channels. "Engage electronic warfare. Jam their communications, disrupt their hive link." The human fleet, using their older, outdated tech, began to emit signals that the Tauric had never encountered. It wasn't advanced, but it was unfamiliar. The Tauric's hive mind link, their greatest strength, became muddled, causing confusion in their ranks. Tauric ships faltered, miscommunicating orders and breaking their tight formations. Meanwhile, the human ships used stealth tactics, slipping through the cracks in the enemy lines, attacking from unexpected angles. The Krasen watched in disbelief as the humans, with their seemingly outdated ships, danced through the battlefield. It was not the overwhelming display of firepower they had expected, but it was effective. Tauric ships, confused and unable to adapt to the humans' unorthodox tactics, began to fall one by one. Valdar shook his head, still unimpressed. "This is cowardice," he muttered. "They refuse to face the enemy directly. They hide and trick their way to victory." Nora's voice crackled through the comms. She addressed Valdar directly. "Commander, brute force isn't always the answer. The Tauric are designed to fight head-on battles. If we play by their rules, we lose. Our strength lies in adaptability." Valdar's skepticism remained, but he couldn't argue with the results. For the first time in months, the Tauric advance had been slowed. The first skirmish between the human fleet and the Tauric was a testament to this unconventional strategy. As the Tauric swarmed, expecting an easy victory, the humans used their agility and unpredictability to their advantage. They deployed drones as decoys, lured Tauric ships into ambushes, and used the debris fields of Krazen wrecks as cover. They fired in short, precise bursts, hitting weak points in the Tauric ships that their corrosive weaponry couldn't protect. Despite the human ships' weaker firepower, their guerrilla tactics began to take a toll on the Tauric. One by one, Tauric ships exploded in bright flashes of light, leaving behind twisted wreckage. The Krazen, watching from their massive, technologically superior ships, were left speechless. They had always believed that brute force and superior firepower were the only ways to win a war. Yet here were the humans, using smaller, weaker ships and still managing to hold their own. Even so, doubts lingered. The Krazen Council remained divided. Could these unorthodox human tactics really hold off the Tauric for long? Commander Valdar, though impressed by the humans' initial success, still harbored deep doubts about their long-term effectiveness. This was only the beginning, after all. The Tauric had always come back stronger. As the human fleet regrouped, Captain Nora Daniels received a warning from her ship's sensors. A massive Tauric fleet was on the move, heading directly toward both the human and Krazen fleets. This wasn't just another skirmish force, it was the main bulk of the Tauric armada. Hundreds of ships, all moving as one, their hive mind link seemingly stronger than before. Nora's expression hardened. She knew that this next engagement would be unlike any they had faced so far. The Tauric had adapted, and now they were coming in force. The humans' ragtag fleet, despite its early success, was about to face its greatest challenge yet. As the Krazen and humans prepared for the impending assault, the tension between them grew. The Krazen, still hesitant to fully trust their new allies, were forced to admit that the humans had proven themselves capable in the short term. But with the Tauric armada closing in, it was clear that brute force and unconventional tactics would both be needed if they were to survive. Nora gave her final orders, preparing her fleet for the fight of their lives. The Krazen warships began to reposition, still unsure if the humans could hold their ground against such overwhelming odds. The clash was inevitable, and as the Tauric fleet loomed larger on the horizon, both human and Krazen forces braced for the battle that would determine the fate of their alliance, and possibly the galaxy. The Tauric fleet descended on the humans and Krazen like a tidal wave of destruction. Their attack was relentless, overwhelming even the Krazen warships, which were far more advanced than anything humanity had to offer. The sky was filled with bursts of plasma and energy beams, as Krazen shields struggled to hold up against the onslaught. Meanwhile, the human ships, small and outdated, weaved through the chaos, seemingly in disarray. Captain Nora Daniels stood on the bridge of her command ship, eyes scanning the battle unfolding before her. To the untrained eye, her fleet looked as if it were crumbling under pressure. Ships broke formation, zigzagging through the battlefield, firing sporadically. But Nora remained calm. What seemed like chaos to the Tauric and even to the Krazen was, in fact, carefully orchestrated. The humans were creating a distraction. The Tauric, focused on the Krazen as the bigger threat, diverted most of their forces to the larger, more formidable warships. The Krazen shields, while technologically superior, were slowly failing. The humans, on the other hand, maneuvered under the radar, using their smaller ships to avoid drawing attention. Nora had anticipated this. The Tauric's hive mind always targeted the biggest, most obvious threat first. Amid the battle, Nora gave the order. Initiate the pulse. The human fleet had been scattered intentionally, positioning themselves around the Tauric armada in a loose formation. The key was not in firepower but in timing. Each human ship had been retrofitted with an EMP device, something the Tauric had never encountered. In unison, they unleashed the EMP bursts, waves of energy radiating from the human ships and sweeping across the battlefield. The effect was immediate. The Tauric, dependent on their hive mind for coordination, began to falter. Their communication systems were temporarily disrupted by the EMP, and without their unified thought, the Tauric ships became disorganized. Their previously flawless formations broke apart, some ships veering off course while others struggled to fire accurately. The Krasen, watching from their command centers, were stunned. What they had perceived as weakness from the humans was now turning the tide. The Tauric, for the first time, seemed vulnerable. Commander Valdar observed the battle closely. His expression was hard to read, but beneath his stoic exterior, he was forced to admit that the human strategy was working. The Krasen, who had prided themselves on brute strength and advanced technology, had underestimated the humans. Their smaller ships, older technology, and seemingly erratic tactics had proven to be far more effective than Valdar could have anticipated. "It's unorthodox," Valdar muttered to his second-in-command. "But it's working." Though reluctant, he realized that Nora Daniels had devised a plan that exploited the Tauric's greatest strength, their reliance on their hive mind, and turned it into a weakness. The Krasen had always believed that the only way to win was through superior firepower, but the humans had shown them another way. As the Tauric ships scrambled to regain control, the humans launched precision strikes, hitting weak points in the enemy vessels. Their small size allowed them to move quickly, darting in and out of the chaotic battlefield. The Krasen, inspired by the human success, began to adjust their own tactics. No longer relying solely on their heavy weaponry, they started to use more agile maneuvers, coordinating with the human fleet in ways they had never considered before. For the first time in the battle, the Tauric were on the defensive. Krasen officers, once skeptical of the humans, began to appreciate the ingenuity they had brought to the fight. Some Krasen ships even began to mimic the humans' tactics, employing quick, evasive maneuvers to outflank the Tauric. But not everyone was convinced. While many Krasen officers adapted to the new strategy, a few still clung to their pride. To them, relying on human ingenuity was a bitter pill to swallow. Commander Valdar, though impressed, wasn't fully ready to concede that the humans had saved the day. He knew this victory was only temporary. The Tauric would regroup, and when they did, their next attack would be far more brutal. He called for an emergency meeting with his top officers. "The humans have bought us time," Valdar said. "But make no mistake. This war is far from over." Valdar's second-in-command, still holding on to a shred of skepticism, replied, "You're suggesting we ally with them long-term?" Valdar nodded. "For now. Their tactics have given us an advantage, but the real test is yet to come. The main Tauric force is still out there, and we must be ready for their full might." As if on cue, a warning signal blared across the Krasen command center. A massive Tauric ship, far larger than any they had encountered so far, appeared on their sensors. It was the Hive Mother, the central control ship of the entire Tauric fleet. The Krasen knew that if they could destroy this ship, it would cripple the Tauric forces. But the sheer size and power of the Hive Mother made it clear that this would be no easy feat. Valdar looked at the display, his face grim. "We'll need everything we have for this," he said. "Human ingenuity and Krasen firepower. Together." Nora received the same warning on her ship. The Hive Mother was the key to ending the war, but it was also the greatest threat they had faced. She began to formulate a new strategy, knowing that this final battle would require everything they had learned so far, and more. As both fleets prepared for the looming fight, an uneasy tension settled over them. The Krasen, who had once seen the humans as weak and irrelevant, now looked to them as allies. Yet, even with their combined forces, the question remained, would it be enough to take down the Tauric Hive Mother and end the war once and for all? The tension was palpable as the human and Krasen fleets made their final preparations. Every officer, every soldier knew the stakes. The Tauric Hive Mother's ship loomed on the horizon, dwarfing all other vessels with its monstrous size. Its destruction was the key to ending the war, but the odds seemed impossibly high. On board the Krasen command ship, Commander Valdar stood beside Captain Nora Daniels, their differences momentarily set aside in the face of a common enemy. "We need a plan that combines both our strengths," Valdar said, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. "We can't rely solely on firepower, but we also can't defeat them without it." Nora nodded, already running through strategies in her mind. "We'll use our ships to harass and distract the Hive Mother." Your fleet should stay focused on delivering a single, devastating blow once we've weakened it. We can't afford to split our forces. The room fell silent as both species officers exchanged glances. Some of the Krazans still hesitated to fully trust the humans, but the success of their previous engagement had earned Nora and her fleet more respect than anyone had anticipated. There was no time for further debate. The plan was set, and every second they delayed brought the Hive Mother closer to annihilating them all. As the fleets moved into position, the massive silhouette of the Tauric Hive Mother advanced. It was surrounded by a swarm of smaller ships, each one eager to protect their queen and crush any resistance. The Krazan took the front lines, their warships bristling with weapons, while the human fleet scattered around them, ready to execute their diversionary tactics. The battle began in an instant, a cascade of blinding light and deafening explosions as both sides clashed. The Tauric's assault was merciless, but the humans were ready. Nora's fleet struck from all angles, their ships darting in and out of the enemy's ranks, hitting weak spots, and then vanishing before the Tauric could retaliate. The Hive Mother, however, was far more dangerous than any of the smaller Tauric vessels. Its thick armor deflected most attacks, and the swarms around it provided constant cover. Despite the Krazan's powerful energy weapons, the Hive Mother was taking minimal damage. Valdar commanded his fleet with precision, firing volleys of concentrated plasma at the heart of the enemy forces. His soldiers fought valiantly, but even with their advanced technology, the Tauric's overwhelming numbers were taking a toll. Several Krazan ships were destroyed in the first minutes of the battle, their shields overwhelmed by the sheer volume of attacks. Yet the humans' unconventional tactics were buying them precious time, keeping the Tauric disoriented and unable to fully coordinate their forces. Nora stayed calm, despite the chaos. Her fleet was taking losses too, but every hit on a Tauric ship, no matter how small, pushed them closer to victory. She knew the Hive Mother had a weakness, they just had to find it and exploit it at the right moment. Then Nora saw her opportunity. A section of the Hive Mother's hull, near one of its massive propulsion systems, was exposed after taking several small hits. It was still heavily shielded, but if they could draw the Hive Mother into position, they could set a trap. She turned to her bridge crew. "Send the decoy ship in," she ordered. "We'll draw it into range of the Krazan main weapon." An old, decommissioned human ship, barely held together by its outdated technology, moved toward the Hive Mother. To the Tauric, it was a prime target. It looked vulnerable, and the Hive Mother's attention shifted. The ship, filled with automated systems and rigged to explode, sailed directly into the path of the massive alien vessel. Valdar watched the plan unfold, understanding what the humans were attempting. With a nod, he gave the order. "Prepare to fire the beam. We only have one shot at this." The decoy ship moved into position. The Tauric ships around it swarmed, focusing their fire on what they believed to be an easy kill. But as they closed in, the human ship detonated, releasing a shockwave that disrupted the Hive Mother's shields for just a moment. That moment was all the Krazan needed. "Now!" Valdar shouted. A concentrated beam of energy shot from the Krazan flagship, cutting through space and slamming into the exposed section of the Hive Mother. The ship shook violently, its hull cracking under the immense force. For a brief second, it seemed to hold, but then the armor buckled, and the Hive Mother's structure began to collapse. An explosion erupted from within the ship as its core destabilized, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The Tauric forces, once unified and overwhelming, faltered. Without their queen, the hive mind fractured, and their coordination broke down completely. The remaining Tauric ships scattered, retreating in disarray. The humans and Krazan watched in awe as the once invincible Hive Mother disintegrated before their eyes, taking with it the heart of the Tauric threat. The battle was over. The war was won. But the victory came at a heavy price. Both fleets were severely damaged, with many ships lost and countless lives sacrificed. As the debris of the battlefield settled, the humans and Krazan regrouped, their alliance forged in the fires of war now facing an uncertain future. Valdar turned to Nora, his expression somber yet respectful. "Your people have done what we could not. You have earned our respect." Nora nodded, exhausted but resolute. We fought together. That's what made the difference. But as both commanders looked out over the wreckage of their fleets, they knew that peace, if it came at all, would be fragile. The Tauric were defeated, but new challenges would arise, and the alliance between humans and the Krasen was still in its infancy. The Hive Mother was gone, but the future remained uncertain. For now they had won. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. The Tauric fled into the depths of space, their Hive Mother obliterated, leaving their once formidable swarm scattered and broken. Their departure left an eerie silence over the battlefield, where the human and Krasen fleets floated in the debris of victory. Both sides had paid a heavy toll for their survival. Ships were shattered, and countless lives were extinguished in the heat of battle. On board the human flagship, Captain Nora stared at the damage reports with a grim satisfaction. They had won, but at what cost? In the Krasen warship, Commander Valdar was no less burdened. His people, known for their supremacy in the galaxy, had been brought low by an alliance he never would have predicted. He reached out to the humans for a meeting, one that would decide the future of both species. Captain Nora agreed without hesitation. They met in the wreckage of a neutral vessel, a symbol of what had been lost in the fight for survival. As the two leaders sat across from each other, there was no anger or bitterness, only the weight of shared sacrifice. Valdar broke the silence. His voice, usually brimming with confidence, carried a note of humility. I underestimated your kind, Captain. Your tactics, your resolve, they caught us off guard. Captain Nora nodded, though her expression remained somber. We're not as advanced as the Krasen, but humanity's strength isn't in our technology. It's in our ability to adapt. We learn quickly, sometimes too late, but we do what's necessary to survive. Valdar studied her, his gaze softened with a newfound respect. You fought as if you had nothing to lose. We didn't, Nora replied, her tone heavy with the weight of the lives lost in the battle. But that's why we won. You've always fought to protect what you have, to preserve your superiority. We fight because if we don't, there's nothing left. The commander's arrogance, once a hallmark of his people, had faded. You've earned your place in the galaxy, Captain. The Krasen will no longer dismiss humanity. You've proven yourselves as equals. Nora gave a small, sad smile. Being equals doesn't make us friends. It just means we understand each other better. The aftermath of the battle left both species at a crossroads. Back on the Krasen homeworld, their council convened to debate the future. The room was divided. Some voices called for an alliance with the humans, recognizing their resourcefulness and tenacity as assets worth cultivating. Others, however, saw them as a potential threat. What if humanity's rapid adaptability made them a rival for dominance in the galaxy? Valdar stood before the council, his mind heavy with the weight of his experiences on the battlefield. Humans are not to be underestimated, he began, his voice firm. They possess a strength we have long ignored, their will to survive, no matter the odds. But we must also be cautious. That same strength could one day challenge us if left unchecked. A council member, his features twisted with concern, leaned forward. And you suggest we ally with them? Let them grow unchecked? Perhaps, Valdar replied. Or perhaps we use this moment to ensure they remain allies, not enemies. Isolation has never been the Krasen way. If we push them away, they will find others to stand beside them. And we may not survive the next threat without them. Meanwhile, aboard the human fleet, Captain Nora faced similar discussions. Humanity had proven their worth on the battlefield, but the future was uncertain. She sat with her advisors, weighing the possibilities. We've shown the Krasen we can't be pushed around, one officer said. But what now? Do we trust them? Nora was silent for a moment, then shook her head. Trust isn't something you give freely after a battle like this. But we've opened a door. For now, that's enough. We keep communication open, but we don't let our guard down. They respect us now, but that respect can easily turn to fear. And fear breeds conflict. Both species, battered and bruised, stood on the edge of an uncertain future. The Tauric were defeated, but the galaxy remained vast, full of unknown threats and opportunities. Captain Nora and Commander Valdar knew that while today brought a fragile peace, tomorrow could bring something entirely different. They agreed to maintain open channels between their people, aware that this peace might not last. As they prepared to part ways, Valdar paused. "What will humanity do now, Captain?" Nora looked out at the stars, her gaze distant. "We'll keep moving forward like we always do. The universe isn't done with us yet. We'll adapt, we'll grow, and we'll be ready for whatever comes next." Valdar nodded, a silent acknowledgement that the future remained unwritten. They might stand as allies today, but the line between friend and foe was thin in the vastness of space. The war had shown both species that survival depended not just on strength, but on adaptability, on the ability to change with the tides of conflict and peace alike. As their ships prepared to depart, a sense of unease lingered. The battle was over, but new challenges awaited. Both the Krasin and humanity had survived this war, but they knew that survival was only the first step. The galaxy was full of dangers yet unseen, and while they had won this battle, the future remained a question mark on the horizon. Humanity, having proven its resilience, was now a force to be reckoned with in the galaxy. They had shown that their greatest asset wasn't their weapons or technology, but their creativity and adaptability. In a universe where the rules could change at a moment's notice, that was a strength beyond measure. And though peace had been forged in the fires of war, both Captain Nora and Commander Valdar knew it was a fragile peace, one that could shatter with the next storm. The future of both species hung in the balance, uncertain but filled with possibility.